I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
You couldn't even get that one out this time. That was crazy.
You over here being crazy before we even started.
I don't know about that.
I couldn't help it. It was what it was.
Okay.
But welcome back. We're
Hi.
glad you're here.
Yep. We had a little snafu last week. We are attempting a new thing, and we are trying to figure out the video side of things, how we want to do that, and the recording of it, this, that, and the other. And apparently it had our computer doing too much at once, and it did not record well, so we ended up missing our Friday post last week. So
Yeah, you can't exactly run your crazy AI stuff and this at the same time. It didn't work out so well.
well, I don't know. I think it's an internet problem. Anyways, I think I broke our internet is really what happened. And so here we are. So on that note, kind of sucks too, because I think last week we had a pretty good conversation, but we're going to shift gears because we have some other stuff we want to talk about. So I guess we'll just have to loop back around to that at some point.
Yeah, we can come back.
So this week it'll actually probably be this week in general because we're kind of a two-parter here. And I don't know, we're going to shift this up. We're recording in a different area of our house and doing things differently. So we'll see how this goes. But I want to talk about parenting. And this is one that we have, I guess, not avoided, but I want to say that we avoided it. We'll just call it what it is.
Probably.
And I want to say that the biggest challenge that we've had, right, is one, us figuring out co-parenting together, right? If you haven't paid attention to, or maybe you haven't listened to any of our earlier podcasts or haven't caught any of it, we actually have 7 children. So we both have a previous marriage on each side. Each of those, so you have a previous marriage, I have a previous marriage, and those marriages produce kids, of course. You have 3, I have 4, so combined we have 7 children.
Yeah.
And part of our biggest challenge would be navigating co-parenting with the other spouses as well as in our house. And we've had these different variations over time where, we've tried kind of, I guess, blocking out the other parent as well as trying to be consistent with the other parent. We've tried to figure out things in our house, how to do that. And it's been, I would say, the last few years, this journey of essentially trying to figure all this stuff out. And what has come of this is the fact that I believe now we have a pretty good way to handle this, and a pretty good way of how we've navigated this in a way that we've found not only encourages growth inside of our own home, but also it really allows you and I to not be disconnected or create division. And it also keeps proper boundaries in place, right? And I wanted to talk about that in the sense of, parenting your own kids in your own house, co-parenting if you have had a previous relationship, because that seems to be very common nowadays, and just talk about these different topics, right?
Yeah.
And so the start of this, I really think, is important to really hammer things that we have hammered before, and starting with your internal conversation, right? Because this is something that I think we've both struggled through at different time periods of our relationship where, we had really negative internal conversation, right? And I would call this out that this is a parenting issue in general.
Yeah,
And I will go as far as to say that if you've never had a negative internal conversation about your child, well, you're lying. Um, because at some point there's been something that has occurred. And people fall into this all too often, and it could be something simple, right? Oh, they're being so dramatic right now, or, they're
they're such a pain in the butt.
yeah, they can be such a pain in the butt sometimes, right? And I mean, there are parents out there, I'm sure, that are mean that and really don't want to be parents and just kind of forced into the situation, or not forced, right? Because it's always a decision, but they found themselves in the situation and they really shouldn't or didn't want to be parents, right? And so there is a level of that. But I would say that the majority of parents, right, um say these things just out of a kind of like expression of their own frustration, right?
Yeah,
And really where that comes from is an lack of knowledge or inability for you to navigate or handle those situations, right? Like when you really think about it, yeah, parenting is harder than we want it to be sometimes, right? That's kind of the nature of the game.
yeah,
A lot of times, you know, basically the we find ourselves in this place where we didn't necessarily have the best examples of how to parent growing up, right? And it's not to say our parents were bad. It's not to say, they sucked or anything like that, right? The truth is like they did the best that they could do with the tools that they were given, right? And a lot of
yeah,
times we see these generational programs or generational patterns, and you'll hear some people call it trauma, right? Which could be potentially, I guess, something you could call it. But in general, it's these patterns or programs that are being ran and they get passed down from generation to generation. And then we're left in this position where, well, we didn't have the best example. That's what we learned. And then every parent has this inherent, I want to do better for my kids kind of situation, right?
yeah,
And then it leads them battling the patterns and programs they grew up with, as well as trying to instill new things and trying to find the balance and not necessarily agreeing with societal rules, maybe agreeing with societal rules or whatever it is, right? And in this place of confusion. And it's so interesting because, for the longest time we fought how to do this, right? Um, the co-parents out, on either side for us, one has a drastically different, or I'd say one household has a drastically different view than we do. Another household has a similar view, but it's kind of on their terms kind of thing, right? And we always tried to play this game of like, okay, well, what's best for the kids is trying to find a balance, trying to find this like working whatever. And what's so interesting is what we found is, of course, the more we can work with the other parents while keeping boundaries, the better it is. But the key part there is while keeping specific boundaries, right? And
yeah,
what we found is inside of our own home, eliminating expectations, um, especially unrealized expectations, and the clearer we can make things, the better off things are, right?
yeah,
And so what I mean by that is, for example, right? And I'm sure every person who's listening right now either experienced this growing up. If you don't have kids, right? You've experienced this when you were growing up. Or if you do have kids, then you have lived this from the parent side. And that is, hey, go clean your room.
Yeah.
right? Okay, they go and clean it, and, there's still some clothes under the bed.
Their version of clean is not clean.
Right, right. There's always this, like, drastic difference between your version of clean and your kid's version of clean, right? And so it becomes this thing of like, well, then you get frustrated and you're like, "You know better, blah, 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 this, that, the other." But here's what I would question, right? Have you ever actually cleaned your kid's room with them and went step by step and showed them, "This is the way I expect you to put your clothes away. This is how under your bed should look. This is how," right? Because what we tend to do is get frustrated, get on them, continue to be like, "You did it wrong, you did it wrong, you did it wrong," while they're attempting to get to that next step to see if that's what was required. And then when they finally reach that step, we go, "Okay, this is the example I expect," right? But they really didn't learn anything because they were in this place of confusion and more or less just trying to um, appease you, or get to that point of like, okay, my parents aren't upset anymore,
Yeah.
right? And so what ends up happening is like this is the cycle and they don't learn anything, right?
Yeah.
So what did we do? Instead, we spent time, like each of us have spent time at some point or another in the kids' rooms, cleaning the room with them. And then we built a room cleaning checklist, right? And said, "Here you go. This is everything we went through. You have now been given a physical example. Here's the checklist. You can go down the checklist," right? There's no unmet or unrealized, I should say, unrealized expectations of, "Oh, well, you're supposed to clean up the clothes under your bed, or you're supposed to put the toys back on the shelf that they belong on, or put the books back on," or whatever you're referring to, right? There's no unrealized expectation because one, you've been given an example. And two, you can't pull the "I forgot" card because you quite literally have a list that's laminated that you can use an expo marker to check off systematically as you work through it on your wall.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure that there's probably people that like, I don't wanna print out a list for what my kid is supposed to do, but we found, like, it it's the situation where you're expecting them to do things and they really have no idea what the expectations are,
Mhm.
and they think their version of clean is clean, so then when you're like, "It's not clean, go try again," they're like, "I don't know what you mean." And so, when we finally and I think this goes for anyone with kids, it's not just the, co-parenting or mixed, household, like, this is for anyone. Your kids don't know what you mean unless you've, like, actually shown them or given them clear expectations.
Right.
And you being like, "Well, I told them last time that all these things need to be done." Well, they didn't actually listen. You know, like, they probably went and did it, but they didn't file that in their brain. Again, their version of clean is still their version of clean. And so if you have expectations of what it should look like, you need to lay them out clearly so that the kids know what those expectations are. So we did. We just made a list of what the expectation is for their room to be clean, our version of clean.
Mhm.
And we printed it off, we laminated it. They can check off the boxes as they go down the list of cleaning their room, but they know what the expectation is because each of them has one laminated and hung up in their room. And so if they try to come and be like, "Well, my room is clean," all we have to do is say, "Did you check off all the boxes on your paper? If you didn't, then go finish it."
Right.
And they know, like, there's clear expectations now. And along with the clear expectations, we ended up realizing that we needed to make actual, like, family rules with clear expectations and what the consequences or rewards were for actually doing what we've asked of them. So now they know they've got a list in their bedroom of how to clean their room properly. There's also expectations that if you don't do it, and we have to continue to ask you to do it the correct way, there's going to be some loss of privilege,
Mhm.
right? Because we're going to give you one chance to correct it and do it the right way. And then if we have to continue to ask you to do it when you already know what the expectation is, then you're choosing that, right? And so there's going to be a loss of privilege. But this has taken us a long time to get to.
Mhm.
We've been living together now for 2 years.
No.
Yeah.
Longer.
No, it's 2 years. Well,
Longer.
like April, so it is just a little over 2 years.
Mm.
But it's literally taken us up until the last, like, 2 months to really figure this out, and we were kinda just winging it, trying to figure things out along the way, but these are also things that, like, I think apply to kids in general, but we've had to go through this process of, like, figuring out how to parent 2 sets of kids, but also just figuring out parenting in general. Because I feel like I've been learning how to do it better the last couple months than I ever have before.
Mhm.
And a lot of that does come along with my internal conversation about the kids in general. But we've had, several instances recently where we have gotten frustrated with each other over things with the kids and realized that, like, you have expectations of certain things. I have expectations of certain things. We haven't really clearly laid them out so that you know what mine are, I know what yours are, and what we expect the kids to do, type of thing. But we were just getting frustrated because it wasn't happening.
Mhm. Well, I wanna take that a step further, right? Because what we started doing, and the reality is the kids unfortunately were, I think, lower on the list than we probably should have made them because we didn't realize at the time this simple fact of, when you go about life, right? Our job as parents is to prepare our kids for life, and from a biblical standpoint to leave them a legacy, right? And we've talked about this a lot recently. It's not necessarily the financial legacy, although personally we feel like that's part of it. But it's the programs and the patterns that we instill in our children that is going to get passed down for multiple generations, right? It's the idea of, hey, this is what a relationship should actually look like. It's this is how to steward your household. This is how to steward your finances. This is how to, encourage growth in your own children. This is what it looks like to follow Jesus. It is all of these things put together.
Mhm,
Um, but here's what's so interesting about this, right? So let's just look at society in general for a minute, right? And how things operate in the world, right? And we can have the whole debate about, because, like, personally, I have a massive issue with public school, right? And you used to be a teacher, so we have both sides of it here, but, like, the indoctrination, right? But we're not talking about the indoctrination. Let's just talk about systems in general, right? Because and this is one thing. Uh, I'll start with the school side, and then I'll show you how this is not different, right? Because a lot of times what you get is how, well, we weren't public school system wants to program you a certain way to get you to be an employee, right? Or whatever. Okay, that's great. But it's or not great, but that's not the point, right? Like, I personally have my own arguments to agree with, like, hey, I don't like a lot of the stuff that's come out of public school. But when we look at purely the way things operate in the world, right? There's a set of systems and rules, right?
Mhm.
So let's talk about that for a second. When your child goes to school, whether you are homeschooling, private schooling, whether you are um, a full-time tutor, public school, whatever it is, right? There's a set of systems and rules that comes along with that. Hey, you have to do X, Y, Z. If you do not, you receive ABC,
Yeah.
right? It's very clear cut and dry. You talk about, and this can range, right? Like with public school. Okay, you go into a public school, a lot of teachers use like the cards, right? I grew up with this. I've heard our kids talk about the cards with the colors, right? And it's like, okay, every kid starts on a green color. Hey, you're being disruptive to the class. Okay, you pull a card, now you're on yellow. Okay, you pull an orange, well, you get a lunch detention or whatever. Okay, you pull a red, well, now you're going to the office, right? And there's some other like more uh a higher level of disciplinary action at that point. This can vary with private schools, right? I've seen and heard of private schools where they still have a whooping room, right? Like your kid acts up, the teacher calls your parent comes in, they got a room with it's a yardstick, right? You're still whooping your kid's butt, right? I'm not debating whether that's okay or not. That's just it is what it is, right? There's in private school, right? Or sorry, in like homeschooling type settings, right? There's some type of discipline that's typically imposed by the mother or the father, whoever is performing, or the private tutor, that is imposing a disciplinary action for whatever behavior, right? But they have a very clear, this is the expectation. If you don't follow this, these are the repercussions. Okay. Now let's get out into the real world, right? Okay. So we're supposed to prepare our kids for the real world. You're driving down the road. Okay. You're driving your car. There is a speed limit sign posted on the side of the road, right? Now you can choose to follow that speed limit sign or not. If you choose to not follow that and you get caught, you get pulled over, you get a ticket, right?
Yeah.
Very clear. Hey, I know what happens here, right? There's a rule book on it. You have to take a test on it. You then drive and hey, this stop sign, this tells me to stop. This traffic light, okay, well, green means go, yellow means I need to slow down and be cautious, red means I need to stop. Hey, I know that I can make a right-hand turn on red because there's this rule book and this test and all of the people are operating in the same manner. Okay, let's look at jobs, right? When you are an employee, you go to this job, right? And you get there and there is a system of how things run. You are explained the system. There's an SOP manual, your operations manual that tells you how to do each job, right? You're taught how to do it by someone there. Some in bigger companies, it can be an actual trainer. In smaller companies, it's somebody else that does that job or knows how to do that job. And then you have this manual, right? Then you also usually have some type of disciplinary rule book or employee handbook that teaches you all the rules that you have to follow to be an employee,
Yeah.
right? And if you don't, this is what can happen,
Right.
right? Now let's flip that because, uh we fall into the entrepreneur business owner side. A lot of other people do, and they're going to argue oh, well, that's what's wrong with the system. Da, 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 da. Okay, let's flip it. What's wrong with your business? Well, you probably don't have systems and procedures in place, right? Like that's quite literally what a lot of what I do on the other side, right? Is that sort of thing. When businesses struggle to actually exist or move forward as a business, most of the time it is a mindset, internal conversation of the owner, which then creates a mindset and internal conversation of the environment and the other people involved. And secondly, there's no systems and processes that are clearly laid out, defined, and there's nowhere to reference them, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of a free for all of like, well, I told you to do this. Okay, well, that's great. Even as business owners, we implement this, right?
Yeah.
Even as okay, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you're doing something like, hey, you're day trading or trading futures or forex or crypto or whatever you're doing, right? You still have a routine that you have to follow. You know, okay, well, depending on where you live, right? You have to get up at a certain time or you have to be in the market at a certain time because you have built a system that you've probably written down, right? If not, you probably are struggling, I would guess, but you've written down your system or you've put in it somewhere that says, okay, I get up at this time or I'm in the market at this time. I follow this pattern, X, Y, and Z, and these are the results, right? So no matter what you're talking about in the world, there is patterns, processes, procedures, and to be successful in whatever area you're talking about, they're put down and physically printed or in a computer or somewhere that can be referenced, right?
Yeah.
But then we get home and we're like, well, hey, our child whose brain's still developing, who really have impulse control in a lot of cases, depending on their age, whose primary function is fun and their decision making, their primary like driving factor behind their decision making is fun. We're like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to tell you to do something. You're just going to listen. You're going to remember because I'm your parent and I tell you what to do. Right.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we end up in this cycle. And then we're telling ourselves, oh man, our kid is being more difficult than we want them to be, or this, that, right? We're literally setting ourselves up. Let's just put the kids aside for a second. We're setting ourselves up for failure. And then we're creating a negative conversation and a negative internal narrative around the failure that we have created.
Yeah.
Right. And so we wanted to talk about this because this is a real thing, right? We see it. It's not just us, right? Like we have plenty of friends that are like, they're married, they're together, they have no previous marriages, and they're trying to parent. And it's the same thing where like everybody is trying to figure out the same things when it comes to parenting, right? And you see the most successful like structures inside of the home is when you adopt some of these same rules that apply out in the real world, that apply in business, right? And where I was looping that back to is like we've started structuring our home a lot like a business, right? And people are like, well, that sounds so weird. But is it? Because when you have this checklist, right? Because let's go a step further, like you had started mentioning like the rules, right? So we also have checklists in the bathrooms, okay? There's a bathroom cleaning checklist that gives them a detailed, you have to do all of these things, right? And we've gone through with all of the kids at this point and shown them this is what it looks like to clean the bathroom. And then there's the checklist, and they can use it's laminated. They can use an expo marker. They can go check off the boxes as they do things, right? So as they have these chores to do, and as it's, hey, clean up after myself, right? And then it's gone a step further, like you said, right? On our wall, we physically have our family values posted, right? And
Mhm.
the kids regularly go through and recite, and they have, granted, we stole a lot of this from like the men's group that I co-lead, right?
Yeah.
But it's these core values that you want your kids to have that you try to instill, and there's these animations or physical movements that you do, because when you talk about how people learn, right, when you're saying things, you're reading things, you're saying it out loud, so now you're reading it, you're hearing it, and then doing a physical movement, right? When you combine all those things from a neuroscience perspective, it's the best way to anchor it in there, right? So we've done that, and then I guess underneath that, right, is literally our house rules. And there is rules with explanations, right? It's, hey, clean up after yourself. This is what that looks like, right? So each rule has a description, and you get through all the rules, and then it says, hey, here's the consequences, right? Here's stage 1, 2, and 3, right? This is what that could look like, right? And we've explain to the kids, and it's even put on there that this doesn't include every single thing, right? So stage 2 is, you're going to have a consequence, right? For the older kids that do have phones, loss of screen time, loss of privileges, like some of the kids, they all like to go out and ride their bikes and go play outside. Okay, hey, like that could be a privilege loss, right? Or potentially writing sentences, right? Like these are the things that are there, and hey, this is what this could potentially look like. There's also a list of rewards, right? So it's just like when you go to your job, hey, if I show up on time and I clock in on time and I do my job, I'm going to get paid. I also know that, hey, when I work overtime, I'm going to get paid overtime, or the same thing with a business, right? If you're a business owner, hey, I know that if I show up and I do X amount of procedures, or I do this and I follow this plan, then I get customers. The customers come in, they're happy, customers spend money with me, and then my life continues to go on, right?
Yeah.
And so much in the same way, hey, here's your rewards, right? When you're following the rules, you're doing these things, right? And here's what I want to say too, right? Because we have to be cautious of like putting our kids inside of a box, right? And being like, hey, this is a dictatorship. The rules that we've set forth are not military style dictatorship rules, right? They're the basics, like this is how to function at life, right?
Yeah.
Res- Cleaning up after yourself, right? You grow up, you get out of the house, unless you're paying a maid, which, hey, if any of our kids are 18 and making enough money themselves to pay for a maid, good for them. Good on them. Hey, come pay for my maid too, right? I
Yeah.
raised you, so hey, help pops out over here, right? But that's a basic function of like this is what you're supposed to do, right? Put your stuff away, clean up after yourself when you take something out. Um, having respect for your stuff or someone else's stuff, right? What happens in the real world when you're driving your car and you just neglect your car because you don't care and you don't ever take care of it and you don't ever park it, in a good place, and you don't clean it up and you don't ever do the maintenance and you do all these things, right? Well, it falls apart. It costs you money. There's consequences, right? So
Yeah.
same thing, having respect for your stuff. Same thing on the other side, having respect for other stuff around you, right? When's the the last time you dealt with a situation where you're out in public or you're at your job or you're wherever and somebody just comes up and takes something off your desk? Or they're like, "Oh yeah, I like your phone, so that's mine now." And they take, right? There's
Yeah.
consequences for not having respect for other people's stuff, right? So there's these rules that we've put in place, the 10 rules, which are basically just teaching them life skills and how to basically get through life, at its core level.
Yeah.
But the reality is like you said, when we start talking about the internal conversations, right? We tell our kids, "Hey, do this, do that." And then they don't meet these expectations, and then we struggle with it, and then we tell ourselves, "Oh, I wish my kid would just listen. Oh, why aren't they getting this?" Right? Here's a good one, because I've said this personally a lot, right? I feel like they have it so easy now.
Mhm.
Oh, these kids have it so easy compared to our generation. Oh, when I was their age, this was what happened, right?
Yeah.
How much time do we spend telling ourselves these stories of how our kids aren't living up to the expectations of our childhood,
Yeah.
right? And what do you think that does over and over and over and over, right? And I'm guilty of it, right? Like you're guilty of it. We're all guilty of it, right? We have this conversation with other parents, right? Like
Yeah.
what parent isn't guilty of that? And the reality is if that is the case, what are you doing to create a structure and a clearly laid out plan and path that the children can follow So there is no question, right? Because like you had mentioned, we struggled with a lot of this stuff. Well, yeah, because we didn't have, right? How many parents operate that way where, mom and dad, well, one of them is kind of a pushover and the other is more of the disciplinary, right? And well, I can get away with this with mom and I can get away with this with dad. And or, I know I can't get away with it over here, so this and that. And
Yeah.
like you said, like there's this unrealized or this incongruency in expectations between the parents, and there's an unrealized expectation of the kids where they're, to be honest, in many cases trying to figure out how to even navigate their life or their home or what consequences look like or what is a consequence or any of this, and there's no real clear reality. And the reality is as adults, right, with fully developed and functioning brains, we literally complain about our jobs or about the organizations, right, that
Yeah.
we're involved in, or events that we partake in when there's unrealized expectations, when there's unclear expectations, when the process and the system of getting things done is unclear. But
Yeah.
yet, inside of our own homes, we expect our children who are still learning and adapting and trying to grow their brain and develop to somehow be on a totally different plane than we are.
Yeah. Well, and to go back to like internal conversations about it, like that's something we were even sitting in bed talking about last night. That, you know, the struggle is that it's not even like a blended family thing, but I think it's definitely worse in blended families. And I've seen a lot of like posts and stuff about it on, Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that about, well, I just feel like a stranger in my own home because of the other parent's kids and blah, blah, blah. But when you're telling yourself all of that all the time, that's what you're going to get. Right.
Mm, yeah.
And so if in your mind you're constantly being like, well, I don't feel like, it's my house when your kids are here, or I don't feel safe in my own home when your kids are here, or, all of these different things that you play in your head is going to play in your actual life. And I feel like we forget that a lot. And I, told you that I definitely struggled with it. Um, and there were conversations that I was having in my head, and then I feel like they were playing out in real life because they were. And when I started switching my internal conversation and even taking time to pray about it and be like, these are not the conversations that I want to have. I want to have positive, interactions and conversations. It started to change, and, like, we've even seen a change recently in the way that the kids interact and how they are at the house. But I think that that's something not just for blended families, but just in general, because I, for a long time, struggled with that with my own kids.
Hmm.
It was a me thing, it was not actually them, but I was struggling with something, so in my head, I was making up these stories. "Oh, they just never listen. Oh, they're so difficult. Oh, they're such a pain in the butt. Oh, they never listen." Just all of these things in my head that was outwardly showing because that's the conversations that I was having. And when I've switched those conversations, I've produce different results. That's not to say that the kids are perfect all the time or that our house is perfect all the time, because it's not. But it's also a lot easier for me to handle and address situations that are not good whenever I'm having those positive thought processes, because I'm not in just a general state of frustration. So I think if we can realize that, like, having positive internal conversations will produce different results with your kids, with your house, with your family, with everyone, and actually start trying it and, using it and changing the environment.
Yeah, that's a big part of it is really, we talked a lot about the blended family situation because that's a reality for us, right? But the truth is it doesn't apply to any, specific family dynamic. It applies to all of them, right? And I think that that's part of the struggle is like people try to make, you know, it out to be where like, oh, well, blended families are more difficult or, non-blended families are more difficult or this like, oh, this or that dynamic or this person or the truth is that like there are situations in life that are hard, right? Um, and sometimes they're harder than we want them to be. But there's no difference really in parenting a, a non-blended family and a blended family. And some people are going to hate that I say that, but the truth is like the the difference is your internal conversation, right? You spend so much time um in these conversations when you have a blended family where you spend so much time having an internal conversation or a conversation with your spouse about the ex-partner and things that they're doing or not doing, and then you spend your time in your own head of like, oh well, my stepchild that oh they get this from the other parent or whatever have you, right? And it's this like negative self-talk, but the reality is like even if you don't have a blended family, the conversation's the same, right? Oh well, they're misbehaving, oh they picked this up from kids at school, or they have this behavior from their friend, or whatever you're talking about. Or let's take all the, hey, they're getting this from somewhere else, right? Let's just talk about you and them directly. Oh, my kid's not listening, or they're acting up lately, or they're so emotional, or whatever the case is, right? You're having these internal conversations that are just making things so negative. And the truth is it's your failure that's creating that situation. And people are like, oh, that's so harsh, but it's true, right? And I use that word because with intention, right? Because parents, that's their number one kryptonite, right? No parent wants to feel like a failure.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we chase all these like, well, if I just do this, well, if I just do that, if I do this, I'm a great parent. No, the truth is, changing your internal conversation is what makes you a great parent, right? Making that adjustment, all the other stuff is a byproduct of that, right? We talk about these like systems and processes and procedures that we've put in place in our house that have created a consistency that the kids can come here and they know what to expect, right?
Yeah.
And we're still changing, we're still adapting those, we're still improving them, right? I don't think systems, processes, and procedures, just like a business, they don't ever stop evolving, right? And as the kids get older, we have a range of, currently 7 to 14,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a big range. You've got these kids that are about, turning 14 or about to be 14, 13, couple of the older ones going into high school, younger ones that are kind of in the middle of grade school still. And so there's kind of this like this area where we have a big variance and variation, right? And a lot of people deal with big variations like that, right? And so as those things change, like the expectations will change, the process and procedures, but clearly communicating those and taking away any sort of ability to uh, have doubt or guessing is a is critical to a well functioning home and a healthy home. However, it starts with, and this is where we loop back to the internal conversation, right? Because it starts with changing your internal conversation, right? These things that we've done were byproducts of us changing our internal conversation. They were byproducts of us changing that conversation and being like, you know what? I want a healthier home. I want a happier home. I want our kids to flourish. I want them to grow in a way that they've never really been able to before, right?
Yeah.
That they haven't in, our previous marriages when we weren't acting right, we weren't in a covenant, we weren't parenting correctly or to the best of our ability. And potentially now even give them something that they may not experience, may or may not at the other homes, but really build somewhere that's like, hey, even if they can't get away with everything and there's a period where they say, hey, I want to, not live in the house anymore, right? Because even parents that aren't dealing with blended families deal with that, right? Where your kid gets to about 16 and they go, man, I don't know about this. My parents got rules. I want to have freedom, and my friends are out doing X, Y, and Z and this and that and da 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 da. But the reality is at some point they realize, man, my parents really did instill all of this in me that has really created the person I am today in a positive light, right? And it
Yeah.
starts with that internal conversation. It starts with, man, my kid is really struggling right now. Man, this is harder than I want it to be. But I can create the solution. I can create the change. Not my kid's so emotional right now. They're so hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Right?
And
You just said the same thing at its core, but they're two very different ways to say it, and your brain will operate from two very different places.
yeah. And just telling yourself that you enjoy being around your kids, you enjoy spending time with them, you love who they are, just all of those like affirming things and uh really change how you view them and see them.
Mhm.
It Yeah, it makes such a difference to be honest. But on that note, what
Part 2.
oh part 2, yeah.
Yeah.
For now though, what should they do for this week?
This week we're gonna start by changing one piece of your internal conversation that you currently have about your kids. So, for example, if that conversation is my kid, when you get frustrated and you say, "Ugh, I wish they would just listen," or "Why don't they listen?" Or better yet, they have it so easy now, right?
Yeah,
We're gonna shift those internal conversations. We're gonna shift that conversation external too. If you're having it with your partner, with your friends, all that stuff,
yeah,
and say, "My kid has some struggles right now that I can help them through."
yeah,
Right? That shift, that conversation shift, that change. Whatever there's plenty of things that we say about our kids, but start with that. That is going to be the initial shift. That's going to be the initial change. Start with that. Secondly, if you have not joined Covenant Community yet, uh, we created a community on school. It is called Covenant Community. It is going to be your hub for everything that we talk about here. There's some really incredible posts that you can be a part of. The purpose is to build a community that you can lean on, uh, that you can go to when you need help, that is going to be uplifting, encouraging, and not your friend that hasn't had a successful relationship that you tell everything and they want to tell you all the negative things about your partner, but actually build a place that you can go get some real results, real help, and real encouragement to build you up and lift up your relationship. There in the free section, there is a ton of stuff. There's some basics of just who we are, why we created it, how to navigate it. There's also the Covenant Foundations, which is a year long. I've called it a Bible study in uh, previous conversations, but I had mentioned this actually to somebody and I said it in a slightly different way. And I was like, man, this is actually a better way to explain that. And that is, hold on, I have to actually look it up because, my brain. It is a guided relational workshop.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's a better way to describe it because there is some biblical scripture in there. There's basically 12 months if you're doing this weekly, if you're sitting down with your spouse for an hour or two. I mean, if you don't have a ton of time, you could do it in a half hour, even less probably. But it is guided worksheets that connect foundational covenant and relational, I guess, topics to actual scripture. It gives you the scripture so you can actually go look it up. You can read the scripture, all that stuff, but they're actual worksheets that you fill out. Both you and your spouse print two of them out, sit down with your spouse, your partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, wherever, whatever stage you're in, and go through it because it is a guided workshop, really, I guess, that you can go through that does have scriptural and faith backing to it. That really will change the way that you look at a lot of things in your relationship. It's going to change the whole dynamic of how you look at relationships, how you look at marriages, how you navigate things. And it really covers such a broad range of topics that if you take the time to actually sit down for an hour a week with your partner, and if you tell me you don't have an hour, then that's ridiculous. You have an hour to spend with your partner every week.
Yeah.
But if you actually spend that hour sitting down, doing the worksheet with them, looking up the scripture, going through it, I promise you, both of you will be completely different people and your relationship will be in a completely different place a year from now. And that's free. Literally, you just go sign up for school, which is completely free. You go join our community, which is Covenant Community, which is completely free. And then you go to the classroom section and it's the Covenant Foundations in there. It is laid out similar to a course, but essentially it's got explanations and all the PDF downloads. You just do one a week and go through it. So there you go.
All right. Well, there you have it. And we shall talk to you later.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.